I can see your screen.
Okay, cool. Let me... All right. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you very much, Zichen, for inviting me to the Summer Institute in Computational Social Science at NUS. I'm currently at Cornell, but I will soon come to NUS to work as an assistant professor. And I benefited from tutorials in the Summer Institute since the first year of its launch when I was a PhD student at Cornell. And I'm very happy that one day I can share some tips and tools with you, and hopefully they will be helpful. And as you can see from this title, my workshop today has two parts. One is investigating subtle motivations and unintended actions, which is a general framework that I am interested in, and it guides my research in the past few years, and it is still part of my research agenda. The second part is text sentiment analysis. I noticed that there has been a workshop on text analysis on the 20th. I didn't make it to that workshop, so I don't know what you learned, but this workshop will focus on a tiny, yet I think important area of text sentiment analysis, that is sentence-level text sentiment analysis. And I hope that my workshop can still shed some new light on your research. And in this workshop, I will start from the background, which is Schelling's model of segregation. Then I will talk about two studies. Each study serves as an example for each tutorial. So the studies themselves are not that important, but they serve as intros for each tutorial. And in the tutorials, I will walk you through the code I shared with you earlier. You should have access to the materials. And throughout this workshop, I will also have discussion questions with you. And if you have any questions, please interrupt me at any time. And in the end, I will have a general Q&A session, and I will be happy to answer any remaining questions or general questions you may have. So as a background information, I would like to talk about the general research framework that guides my research. This research framework is inspired by Thomas Schelling's segregation model. So in Schelling's classic model, he used a simple method of rolling dice to show how individuals' moderate preference for same-race neighborhoods could lead to severe racial segregation. So my past and current research projects have been influenced by this idea of micro to macro approach. And my research focuses on individual motivations and their impacts on collective behaviors, especially in online communities. And I'm particularly interested in how inconspicuous individual motives can lead to unintended behaviors when aggregated, and the collective tipping sort of processes that are involved in these consequences. And this micro to macro approach is a general framework that has some seriously cool implications, especially when we apply it to the world of online texts. Now, let's picture this. Communication behavior has become so visible these days, like never before. And the vast majority of these observations are raw text. And we have access to a massive amount of raw text, and that opens up a whole new world for studying human motives on an individual level and understanding the macro level phenomenon. And one fascinating type of raw text that we often come across is online reviews. Think about this. Whenever you browse through Amazon or Yelp, you stumble upon loads of text-based reviews. And they give us an incredible opportunity to sort of examine how people express their thoughts, opinions, and experiences. So in today's discussion, we will be focusing mainly on the implications of the micro to macro approach in the context of online texts, with online reviews being a prime example. And for each tutorial, I will present a brief study as an example to give you a better sense of what we will do and what we can do with the method we are learning today. The first study that I will briefly talk about is part of this paper published at Telematics and Informatics. And we're going to zoom in from the micro level, looking closely at the individual text expressions, and then zoom out to the macro level to examine broader patterns and trends on aggregate. It's like we are taking a journey through different layers of text analysis. And my goal is to show you that the micro to macro approach and the text sentiment analysis will work hand in hand to uncover some hidden gems in our studies. So these are common types of reviews, and I'm sure you are quite familiar with online reviews, different kinds of online reviews. Reviews are created to help us make better consumption decisions. And I personally read reviews all the time. Like I read product reviews before placing my order on Amazon. I check out Yelp reviews before going to a restaurant, and I read guest reviews on Airbnb before making any reservation. And these are all reviews of products and services. But there is another type of reviews on Airbnb. So if you use Airbnb, you receive reviews from your host. By the way, how many of you have used Airbnb or similar room sharing platforms? Just want to check. Okay, so do you receive reviews from your hosts? And how often do you check the reviews about you? Do you care the reviews about you that much? Or are there any differences between the review you write for your stay and the review you received about yourself? Any thoughts on this? So I cannot actually look at. If there is any hand, let me know. But
Hear me?
Yes.
No.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
So I think the customers will care more about the reviews because they I mean the product owners will care more about their own reviews because the customers will check them to decide whether they're going to buy or whether they're going to book that Airbnb. But for us as customers, we don't care about how the sellers review us because nobody will look at our reviews to decide whether to.
But yes, good point. But do you know that actually for hosts they will actually check your reviews before deciding whether they want to accept you as a host or not?
Yeah, but
sometimes
it's not that sensitive. I mean, as long as we don't have a 1-star review, I don't think the Airbnb refuse people to book their Airbnb.
That's true.
Not that sensitive.
Yeah. So I think any other hints? But I think the general consensus is that there are some differences between reviews from the host side and reviews from consumer side or guest side. And again, for those who are not that familiar with the guest and host reviews, here is how they look like. After a stay, you as a guest write a review of your stay, and your host also write a review about you as a guest. And normally, we would think these two types of reviews are similar, and the only difference is that host reviews are written by host and guest reviews are written by guests. And you can read the guest and host reviews in pairs. And I will give you 1 minute, and I would like to hear about like what differences do you notice just by reading these pairs of guest and host reviews.
The guest reviews are more specific.
Sorry, I cannot hear you clearly.
The guest reviews are more specific, and the host
Mhm.
reviews are just normally one sentence and very brief.
So what do you mean by more specific? Can you clarify?
Well, semantically, it reviews involves more aspects, like details of the room and stuff. But the host reviews is just a positive sentence.
Yes, and they tend to be short, right? And in terms of content, do you notice any differences except the way how they write reviews? So as you just pointed out, for hosts, mostly they are talking about.
There's a student that say something on the chat.
Oh yeah, let me check. Oh yeah. That's exactly what I'm looking for. So guest reviews are about the facility, while host reviews are about people, individuals. So here, as you can see among guest reviews, although there is some component about people, the host, a large proportion of guest reviews is about the room, the property, the location, the amenities, etc. But for host reviews of guests, there is no entity except for people, the customers, the guests, the consumers. Okay, then why does this difference matter? Why it matters because a uniform policy may lead to different results to these two types of reviews, simply because they tend to have core differences. So we took advantage of a review policy change on Airbnb to show this theoretical difference. And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about in terms of policy change. So prior to the policy change on July the 10th, 2014, hosts and guests on Airbnb had the power to see each other's review content right away after posting. So imagine the dynamic of that. And both host and guest had immediate access to the reviews, and it could have had quite an impact on their perceptions and interactions. In other words, if I'm a host, you being my guest, the moment you submit your review to my listing, I will be able to see and read your review, and I will be able to write my review about you in response. So, and that's also a bit different from features in other review platforms that usually are considered as responses from merchants. It is regarded as reviews from hosts, but also hosts can also post reviews first and then wait for the consumers to write reviews in written. So the transparency was right there, front and center. But as you can probably guess, things changed on and after July the 10th, 2014. The policy implementation marked a turning point that altered how reviews were shared and seen and read by different parties. Specifically, after the policy change, users would not see the others' reviews until they had posted their own reviews or until a substantial waiting period had passed, which is, I think, 14 days after the stay. And this indicates that the other was not giving. So unless there is a sign that one side will not give any reviews, the policy would prevent one side to posting reviews to influence the other side. So just based on my description of the policy change, basically, previously, reciprocity was possible. But after the policy, it became impossible to, having your review influence the other side's review. So just based on my description of the policy change, I was curious, like, what kind of change do you think will happen to guest and host reviews, respectively? Especially for those who, probably you did not use Airbnb before the policy change, but I'm just curious, based on my description, like, what kind of change do you think will happen to the guests and hosts in the context of writing reviews? So this is a policy that is meant to influence every single user and their individual motives. But what kind of macro level consequences do you think that may have on each side on aggregate gradually after the policy? Any thoughts on it?
Perhaps they would be, can you hear me okay?
Louder, please.
Perhaps they would be more honest because they wouldn't have that reciprocity biasing their review.
By they will be more honest, you are talking about both sides, right?
Yes, or honest, not in a like capital T truth sense, but just based on their experience, they would share what they felt were their true experiences, and it wouldn't be influenced by this feeling of, oh, I need to give back because they said something nice about me or overlooked something that they didn't like about their stay or about the host or about the guests.
I see. So the reason being that they don't need to worry about the other side, right?
Right.
Great. So that is actually our initial hypothesis and our instinct that drives this research. So we used regression discontinuity design, and what we found here is that for guest reviews, after the policy, the reviews became less positive and less pro-social, which is exactly, well, I think in line with what you just mentioned. But why? Because for guest reviews, after the blending policy, with reduced pressure of reciprocity, the component of people in guest reviews will be reduced, and the component of objects in the reviews will be increased. Remember, previously I showed you for guest reviews, it mainly contains, people and objects. So guest reviews will be more objective and less positive or pro-social. And I think it is quite commonsensical. And before the policy change, when hosts could, read your reviews immediately, if you felt, your stay was just so-so, but received a very positive review from your host, and you might, reciprocate with a more positive review than you would have given. But after the policy change, reciprocity was eliminated. So guest reviews became less pro-social or positive compared to before the policy change. So that is for guest reviews. Then what about host reviews? intuitively, we may think that the same result would happen to host reviews as well. But as you can see from the figures on the right side, the result actually is exactly the opposite. After the blending policy change, host reviews became more positive and pro-social. But why? Any thoughts on this? Why the host reviews actually became more pro-social, more positive? And to be honest, when I first got this result, I thought like my analysis was wrong. Previously yeah, any thoughts?
Is it because the hosts want to show that they are like very friendly and pro-social hosts?
And also, I didn't mention a detail. Although after the policy, you could not see others' review, you will actually get a notification. Okay, a question from the student side. I'm checking the chat. Now, okay. Looks like the main laptop crashed.
Hi, we are back up again.
Okay, so am I good to go? Shall I move on? Okay, cool. So for previously, I briefly mentioned that for host reviews, they are reviews of people. And after the policy change, host review guests without knowing how guests review them. So that is a very important precondition. After the policy change, hosts must review guests without knowing how guests review them. So hosts were put in an initial stage of interacting with people. And when it comes to interacting with people at an initial stage, people have pressure to be pro-social and cooperative in order to reduce relational uncertainty. So even in one-shot exchanges without future interactions, like the exchanges between most Airbnb hosts and guests. So this study shows that one uniform design on the platform can lead to unexpected consequences. For example, Airbnb's blending policy reduced some pro-social bias in consumer reviews, but the vendor reviews, the host reviews, revealed an opposite pattern after the policy change. But some may think this is a good thing because vendor reviews, host reviews apparently become more positive. But when every single review is positive, it actually lead to the concept of a positive review being meaningless. You see, the value of a positive review lies in its ability to distinguish exhibitional experiences from the average experiences. So it is the contrast that brings meaning and significance to those positive ratings. But if every single review is, glowing with positivity, it becomes difficult to differentiate between truly outstanding experiences and those that are just average. So if you are a host, it may be rather difficult for you to tell the difference between a good guest and a nightmare guest. And in terms of theoretical implication, this study shows that consumer reviews and vendor reviews are different, and reviews should not be simplified as impersonal, unbiased, but should be understood as socially produced with different degrees of relational dynamics. So in conclusion, this study shows that the design of online review systems should be mindful about the distinction between customer and vendor reviews, because a uniform design can lead to, again, unexpected consequences. And also there are some social concerns about the impact of crowdsourced evaluations on reputations of individuals. We know for product reviews, they have a set of objective properties. So once you aggregate product reviews, you are likely to get some objective wisdom of crowds. But people's reputation is often context dependent, and people may be, a pro-social in one relationship, but exploitative in another relationship. So the aggregation of reviews of people may not reflect what we call wisdom of crowds, because the lack of clear and universal standards. So here, the study one is an example of how we can use the micro to macro approach and a text sentiment analysis to uncover some hidden gems. And let's shift gears and dive into the methods. So we've covered some interesting research background, but it's time to focus on the how. Like, how do we measure sentiment? How do we do the text analysis? And as you may have already picked up, sentiment analysis plays a very crucial role in this study, although I mainly talked about the discontinuity design. So I would like to talk about sentiment analysis, especially sentence level sentiment analysis. So briefly, sentence level sentiment analysis is a major focus within the field of sentiment analysis, and researchers have primarily been working on figuring out the polarity of sentences, whether they are positive, neutral, or negative. And they do this by analyzing the sentiment information present in the text of those sentences. And it's all about understanding the sentiments behind each sentence. So now let's check out the code. And I think all of you have access to my code, right? I will switch to my screen of RStudio. Okay. Can you see my screen of the RStudio? Okay, so this is meant to be a hands-on workshop, but teaching. This is my first time teaching remotely, so bear with me. If you have any questions, interrupt me and let me know. First of all, by the way, you can see my screen, right? The RStudio. Okay. So these are just some readings I find very helpful, especially this one published in 2011. I think it serves as a very it's a very short but important work in text analysis. Okay. And these are just some recommended papers if you are interested in this part of method, I find these are quite useful as well. So again, this workshop will be mainly focusing on this package. And the first part of the code was initially created by my collaborator, Min-Soo Park, but I did some adaptations. I guess I will first briefly, walk you through the code. And actually, I've already added some detailed notes. But if you have other questions, please let me know. First, for those who haven't installed this package, run this code, and I think it will automatically install the package for you. And here is the GitHub page if you want to dig deep into this package of Cinnamon. And I think you also have access to the sample data that I shared via Google Doc. Actually, before I move on, I just want to make sure everyone on the same page. If you can change your the directory to the path, whatever path on your laptop, and load this data, and we can run the code together. And give me a thumbs up or raise your hand if you have access to the data, and if you have loaded the data to your RStudio. Cool. Okay, so the code itself, well, personally, I think it's I've checked multiple times. I think it's I've tried my best to make it intuitive, but I think some parts, probably this is just the way I write code, and that may cause some confusion. So this is, again, actually this data was publicly available from the most recent Yelp data set challenge, but the original data set has, I think, more than 35 million data points, which is huge. So I randomly sampled 50,000 for this workshop. And for the purpose of this workshop, the first step I would suggest is to focus mainly on the restaurants with price information, because for some merchants, they do not have price information, mostly because of lack of data so this is directly from Yelp, so it's not about the data collection, but about like in reality they do not have this important information. So as you can see, most of the merchants are lower end or merchants. And by the way, so I keep saying restaurant, but I think for the sample data, it has all the merchants available on Yelp in the several cities. So the next step is to cut down computational time. So let's use a random subsample of 1,000 reviews of each price level from the whole data set. But when you adapt this code for your own data set, you don't need to do this random sampling, but this is just for the efficiency of our workshop. So as you can see, after the random sampling, for each price, we have 1,000 data points. Oh, by the way, so here I categorized, I combined this price levels $3 and $4 merchants, because as you can see, the $4 merchants are like only a tiny part or proportion of the data, the whole data. And next is about the sentence level sentiment analysis. But before we talk about this, which is very simple, as you can see, a few lines of code, I just want to emphasize that there are many tools that can give you like paragraph level or document level sentiment. But note that for example, Luke, it is not that reliable for a short like text, like social media posts or reviews in this context. And usually what I will do is that I will run different kinds of sentiment analysis, at least 3 types, to do sort of a robustness check. And I will use sentiment R first, and then if the result holds, I think Luke and Watson or Vader, usually they will render similar results. So let's make sentences our unit of analysis in this workshop. And the following code split reviews into sentences. So the first step is to split each review into sentences, and then it will group the sentences and their average sentiment score by business ID, price level, and review stars. Why like a price level and a review stars? By the way, so here it is because for this workshop, I'm focusing on the restaurants, the merchants, the businesses. So that's why I reaggregate them into business ID. But for your analysis, for your own data set, it may be individuals or maybe other institutions or entities. So just to check the price level 1 or $1 merchants. Here is let me quickly check. So as you can see, now for each business ID, there is a average sentiment. This is the average, aggregated from like each sentence, the sentiment of each sentence. And you also have a standard deviation, word count, review stars. These two are there because of this line of code. So as you can see, it's quite straightforward, right? Like we sample, here we focus on $1 merchants, and let's do the $2 and $3 merchants. And by the way, you can do this without separating the sub samples. For example, here you will get basically the combination of the 3 separate data sets, which is a sample sentiment, this document. So overall, I think it's quite intuitive, but I just want to show you like visually, like what we have. Here to factorize the price and review stars. And so if you have a categorical variable that should have a certain order, you can also follow this, re-level your factor or categorical variables. And now let's calculate the confidence intervals for each price level and the reviews star ratings. Because the reason why I want to further break down by review stars, because sentiment is often correlated with star ratings. Because we can imagine that for 5-star reviews, its sentiment will be very positive. And for 1-star ratings, without reading that actual text content, you can imagine that the sentiment score will be low. And here, as you can see, we have this, I'm not sure if you can take a look at the, let me switch to this plot. Okay, so this is what we have from that GG plot. And it breaks down by review star rating 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the colors represent the star rating as well. And the x-axis is the 3 price levels: $1, $1 $2 $3 or $4 signs. And the y-axis is the average sentiment. So just by looking at this plot, what do you think? Like, what kind of conclusion can we draw from this plot, from the sentiment analysis we just did together? Like, what kind of conclusions can you draw? Any thoughts on this? Oh, overall, like, I'm not sure. Well, by the way, did the speaker talk about the sentence level sentiment analysis on the 20s? I was not here. Like, why do we want to, focus on the sentence level sentiment analysis? And if, based on what we have now, the plot, like, what kind of conclusions can we draw? Or like, how to interpret this result?
You hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's interesting in chart 5 that the $3+ sign had the highest rating. It makes me think, oh, perhaps because if people spend more, they want to justify spending that much money, so it influences how they feel about it.
So you are talking about this part, right?
Yes.
Like those consumer reviews toward the very expensive restaurant, expensive merchants, and those reviews giving 5-star ratings. So emotionally, they tend to give very overly positive, like express like overly positive emotions in their reviews.
Right.
Yep. And what else for others? So that's the I think that's the difference within this panel and between these 3. But what about the y-axis, for the differences of in y-axis between?
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
I think maybe the start. I think this is a review about the response, as you have mentioned. So I think maybe the stats is positively related to the review, the sentiments.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's true. That's true. That's true. That's why we want to break down by star ratings. I think you are referring to the fact that on average, the y-axis for the 1, it's below 0, and 2, it's around 0, 3, it's around 0.1, right? And for 4, like below 0.3, and 5 above 0.3. So that's the general trend. That shows, well, I would be surprised if it does not follow this pattern. And what are the interesting findings?
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes.
I feel for the more expensive restaurant, the review seems more stable compared to the reviewer seems to be quite similar and also higher reviews compared to the cheaper one. Is that the answer that you want?
Sorry, I got lost. Like, can you repeat like in a slowly? Sorry
And
about
for
that.
the last one, for the fixed picture, it seems the reviewers gradually, I mean, for the line, it's priced mostly from lower to higher. But for the third one and like the first one and the second one, it's not stable. I mean, for the scores, it's kind of
You mean
not
so?
that. Yeah.
If I understand you correctly, you are saying that the differences between like the three price levels in the review star 5 is more salient among other panels compared to other panels.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. That's a good point. I didn't actually think about that before this workshop, but actually you reminds me of some like many papers on review star ratings. You know, on almost on any crowdsourced review sites, most of the reviews are like 5 or 4 star ratings, with a tiny portion of reviews being 1 or 2 star ratings. Why? Obviously, people don't want to be retaliated by merchants. So if they wanna, unless they are really mad at a particular merchants, they will just leave no review instead of writing negative reviews. But here, as you can see, even though there is a large proportion of 4 and 5 star ratings, especially for 5 star reviews, emotionally they tend to be quite different in terms of price levels. In other words, even if you, let's say for $1 restaurants, $2 restaurant, and very expensive restaurants, even though you seems to receive a larger proportion of 5 star ratings, right? Like let's say each restaurant at each price level has like 10 5-star ratings, but emotionally they are different, right? So although at the the first glance it looks like each one of you have 10 5-star ratings, but emotionally they are different. That's one conclusion we can draw. That's I think another example of unintended consequences. We normally won't draw unless we see this kind of plot and analysis. So reflecting on the assigned readings, both on the sentiment analysis and other forms of analysis. So I just want to discuss with you and think about like what other kinds of interesting insights you can get from a sentiment analysis of the Yelp sample data. So my intention is that I want you to run the code by yourself and maybe change some variables. For example, here I break down by price level and the review stars. But how about you break it down by, let's say, let me check what kind of variable did I include in the data. So if you can also check review count or whether it is open or not, and like the categories. So in a word, I just want to have you run the code on your own and try to draw some interesting conclusions, and we can discuss. And I think it will be more useful for you to run the code compared to me running the code on my end. So I will briefly give you like 5 or 10 minutes, and I will, if you have any interesting findings, let me know, and we can discuss as a whole group. Now, I don't want to put too much pressure on you. If you have any insights or thoughts, share with us.
Did you hear me? Did you hear me okay like that?
A bit louder, please.
Can you hear me okay like this?
Yes.
So I actually ran a regression of the number of wars and the sentiment number, and I actually find like the more words people wrote, the more negative sentiment is. So like when people are angry, they tend to write a lot.
Yes, that's actually quite intuitive. Like, imagine I could imagine that if you wanna criticize someone, you wanna provide some evidence, right? It's instead of ranting without any evidence. Yes, I think that's a good finding. But to further corroborate your hypothesis, we probably want to check what they really write, what their actual text, or maybe compare those low sentiment reviews with other reviews or the baseline. Yeah, but that's a very interesting point.
And I do have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
So the package sentiment R that we use, could you explain a little bit more like what, because there are a lot of ways to do sentiment analysis.
Yeah.
I wonder, have you like compared this package with the others to test the accuracy, and or is it a lexicon based package or something else?
Well, first of all, the reason why I choose sentiment R is because it can do sentence level analysis in a way that is very intuitive and easy to follow, and it is relatively fast on handling large data sets. But I actually with this code, here, there is one important step is to split reviews by sentences, right? Actually, once you split the reviews or text into sentences, you can theoretically use all kinds of the text and sentiment analysis tool, including Luke or Watson or Vader.
So have you compared the accuracy? Like, have you basically manually verified whether the human being?
So I did compare a different analysis, text sentiment analysis, but only for the purpose of my own research. I did not compare them using standardized like large data set for the purpose of comparing those tools. Any other thoughts from other students? If we can also discuss it later. I guess it's time to move on to the second part of my workshop. Let me switch my screen. Can you see my slides? Oh no, let me double check. Okay, cool. So let me continue my second part of tutorial. All right, let's take a detour and explore another study that showcases the vast possibilities of sentence level sentiment analysis. And this particular ongoing study is a collaborative effort between me and Professor Han Lu from the University of Michigan. And another version of this study was previously presented in this year's ICA conference. And this study focuses on the concept of intersectionality. And intersectionality is about how different systems of inequality come together and affect our individual experiences. And let me give you 2 examples to make it clear. First, imagine a woman not only faces gender discrimination, but also racial discrimination. Intersectionality helps us understand that her experiences are influenced by both her gender and her race. It's not just about being a woman or being a person of a certain race. It's about how these aspects interact and create unique challenges and advantages. And let's take another example of someone from a low-income background who identifies as LGBTQ+. And this person might face discrimination not only based on their socioeconomic status, but also because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. So that's how intersectionality comes into play. And you might be wondering, why is it important to study intersectionality? Well, here are some key reasons. First, as my previous 2 examples show that intersectionality recognizes that different forms of discrimination overlap and affect people's experiences in complex ways. And second, recognizing multiple forms of discrimination. Intersectionality encourages us to move beyond a single issue perspective and consider the interconnected nature of social identities and systems of power. And finally, advocating for marginalized groups effectively. So when we study intersectionality, we get insights into the specific needs and experiences of marginalized and underrepresented groups. So in summary, intersectionality is about recognizing that different systems of inequality intersect and shape our lives. That creates a more nuanced understanding of how different aspects of our identity interact and influence our experiences. And under the research framework of micro to macro approach, in this study, we are interested in intersectionality reflected in reviews on aggregate, and especially specific dimensions of evaluation in reviews on aggregate. So when it comes to studying intersectionality, there have been numerous research efforts that explore this concept, even in online context. But it's worth noting that many of these studies have mainly focused on examining specific demographic individually. For example, some studies focus purely on race or gender to investigate their impacts separately. But here's where intersectionality comes into play. This framework suggests that it is essential to analyze multiple identity categories and their consequences simultaneously. In other words, instead of studying one aspect in isolation, we should consider how different forms of identity intersect and influence one another. Now, it's worth mentioning that there have been some studies that do explore combined demographics, but these studies often have specific settings in mind that focuses on particular contexts. Like this Markowitz paper, it mainly focuses on the doctor-patient setting. Alternatively, they might examine behavioral patterns such as booking behaviors rather than delving into broader implications of intersectionality, like this this PNAS paper published in 2017. So in our project, we are looking into the concept of intersectionality within online reviews. Now, when we think about online reviews, platforms like Amazon or Yelp often comes to mind. But here is one thing, actually we discussed already. Most of the reviews you will find on those platforms are mainly about products. And that's why we decide to set our sites on Airbnb, because as we have discussed in study 1, Airbnb's guest reviews are a little different. They go beyond just evaluating the products, the location, the room, the amenities. They also delve into evaluating the people involved in the experience, such as the hosts. So by measuring the guest reviews on Airbnb, we can explore how intersectionality plays out in this unique context. And we get to analyze how evaluations of people shape the overall review experience. All right, let me quickly talk about the data method. We've gathered a large data set of around 430,000 guest reviews that were directed toward about 20,000 hosts on Airbnb. And we used a facial recognition algorithm to detect perceived racial and gender identities within these reviews. And to detect host-related sentences, we used keywords like the host names, such as like Tony or Lily, along with the term host, to identify sentences related to the hosts. So remember in the first tutorial, we talked about breaking down reviews by sentences. So here we essentially follow that method, but we further, we find out the sentences that are related to hosts, or the sentences about hosts. And then we use sentiment R again, and this helped us measure the sentiment expressed within the reviews. Now let's take a quick look at the results. In our graph, the x-axis represents the race of the host, while the y-axis shows the sentiment of the reviews toward the hosts. And it's important to note that this sentiment score has been standardized by subtracting the mean of the guest groups. So that's why here you see tiny value here. And you will notice that each panel corresponds to a different guest race, and the colors in the graph represent guest host pairs, like female, red, and female, male. So this guest, female guest and the male host. So this is the blue color. So the plot honestly might look a bit complex at the first glance. So to make things easier to digest, I will just highlight the pairs that have significant results. Now pay close attention to the red and green colors among white guests. And these are the scenarios where we found some noteworthy differences. See, white guests showed biases toward Black hosts, but interestingly, these biases were more pronounced among female or male white guests toward Black female hosts. So it's remarkable to see how these dynamics play out within the guest-host interactions. And my point here is to show you the possibilities with sentence level sentiment analysis. So it's not just about simply breaking down the reviews into sentences and then get a sentiment score for each sentence and you aggregate and get an average. It actually provides other possibilities, like if you are interested in a specific dimension of a document or a review, then you will be able to measure the sentiment of those dimensions. Okay. Now, let's talk about tutorial 2. Let's dive into tutorial 2. So in tutorial 1, we learned how to measure sentiment at the sentence level, but there's more to it. When we start thinking deeper about this, actually it opens up a lot of possibilities. So we can actually, again, measure sentiment for specific sentences that target our research interest toward a particular aspect. Let's take Yelp, for example. We might be more interested in measuring the sentiment expressed in reviews about food or service rather than the environment or the overall ambience. So it's like narrowing down our focus to extract meaningful insights. And that's where tutorial 2 comes into play. In this tutorial, I will guide you to, I will walk you through the code that allows us to do exactly what I just mentioned, the sentiment of reviews related to food and service or even environment. And we will learn how to analyze sentiment for specific aspects or categories within a text. And it's like having a laser pointer to zoom in on the areas that truly matter to your research. Now let me switch my screen. Okay, can you see my studio? Okay. And let's talk about the second part. Okay. Now for this part, we do need another package. So this just makes things easier that can allow you to do parallel tasks. So briefly, the background story is that here I want to measure the sentiment of sentences related to food and service among the reviews toward restaurants. And obviously, you want to come up with a few keywords that are related to food or service or whatever aspects you are interested in checking. So these are the keywords I found from the Yelp categories. So it's not like the random keywords that I came into my mind. These are the keywords listed by Yelp under the restaurant categories that I think normally indicate they are talking about food. And here the MS Food Cat, it simply refers to the keyword, the food related keywords from a previous manuscript. This paper published in Marketing Science. That's why it's called MS. So it is their keywords, which honestly I not 100% sure why they come up with these words, but for the purpose of this workshop, I will just combine the official keywords with the keywords from this Marketing Science paper, and we will just combine these keywords together. So all these lines of code are just to come up with a list of keywords related to food. And similarly, these are the keywords related to service. And again, these keywords are used for detecting the food-related sentences and the service-related sentences. And let's combine the keywords into combine them together. So and here this is just a checking sentiment of a random review, and these are the copy. For this sentence, I copy and pasted from the data set. And for the section 4.3, these are just the two functions that help divide reviews into sentences and finding out sentences related to food and the service. So the first function, as you can see, I name it as a chunk into sentences, so it's dividing reviews into sentences. And the next function is about inspecting the sentiment using sentiment R. And we want to lower the text, like make all the text lowercase, because the keywords are lowercase. Why it's lowercase? Because here I lowercase the Yelp category. And this is the major part of this this part of analysis, like checking the sentiment level, sentence level sentiment for food related evaluations and the service related evaluations. It's gonna take about 2 minutes, so I will not run this live, otherwise we will just have 2 minutes of silence. But again, I've pre-run this before this workshop. I will show you the result soon. But if you are interested, you can run it on your end. It's gonna take about 2 minutes. And these are just some quick, aggregation calculation of the sentiment related to food and service. And in case you are interested, you can just check whether the sentiment analysis seems to be correct. For example, let me check. So here looks like this review, there is sentiment toward food-related sentences, but none for service-related sentences. So so here's the actual text. So it's about the food is not good and extremely overpriced. Save your money and then go find something else that is more suitable for what you really want. Yeah, so there's no comment on service, but mostly for food, and for food it's a negative sentiment. So this is just to check, whether it makes sense. And I always do this to get a rough understanding of whether the analysis following the right paths. Now, similarly, let's calculate the confidence interval of food and the service sentiment for each price level and the review star rating. And here, I just want to combine the food and the service results together to just give you a overall look at the results. And let me switch my screen to the general plot. Can you see the plot? Okay. Now, again, let's interpret the results. I will give you 1 minute. Like, what kind of conclusion can you draw from this plot, from this data sample? And quickly, it's x-axis being the price category. Each panel refers to a star rating, and the color refers to whether it's food-related review sentences or service-related sentences. And y-axis is emotional latence, the sentiment.
Maybe I can do the first. Professor, can you hear me well?
Professor, you mute yourself.
Yeah. A bit louder, please. Thank you.
Okay. Since for the base picture, is that the start for the most restaurant, the most expensive restaurant?
Mhm.
So, okay, it appears that service, the reviews for the service is significantly from the picture significantly higher than, I mean, positive than the food compared to other prices. And they have very divergent or different reviews. Like for the 1 star, it's quite opposite. Like even contradictory in reviews. And they feel very good service in a very expensive restaurant, but the food is not that good compared to the service.
So you are talking about this pair, right?
Yeah.
And this is like a $1 cent restaurant, like mostly very cheap restaurants, like or even food cart or food truck. So it looks like based on what you just said, for those very cheap restaurants, when they receive 5-star ratings, consumers actually tend to be happier toward their service, right? But isn't that counterintuitive? Because like normally I would imagine like when I go to those really cheap restaurants, I wouldn't expect any service from them. But looks like, suddenly people care about service when they get 5-star ratings toward those really cheap restaurants, knowing that those restaurants, they don't have service. Well, they do, at least they do not have resources for improving or even hiring enough people to improve service. So that's I think a very interesting part, right? Like if you ask cheap restaurant owners about like how they allocate their resources to improve the overall popularity or revenue or consumer satisfaction, probably they would not allocate a big proportion of their funding or money to improve their service. But looks like consumers still care about service, especially when they want to give 5-star ratings. A good point. What else?
I think they just have very low expectations. So when they get any kind of service, they will feel very happy. Oh, even in this, easier to be satisfied.
Oh yes, that's a good point. Yes, that could be. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very interesting one.
I think generally speaking, the service is very important and significant for the restaurant to receive the positive sentiment.
Could you tell us like how do you draw this conclusion?
Because when we compare 5 pictures, we can see the surveys when people have the much more higher positive sentiment, the service is high, and rather than that, the service is very low. So just in general speaking, I think so. So maybe people are think very highly of the service, to make them very feel comfortable.
Yeah, especially like if we look at the first panel, when people give really bad ratings, well, they looks like they mostly are mad at the service, especially for the expensive restaurants, right? Like within the expensive restaurants. So the last year there was a quite viral video about finding good Chinese restaurant in America. So basically, the influencer mentioned that don't go to 5-star Chinese restaurant in America. Look for 3.5-star Chinese restaurant. Because why? Because like Western consumers, American people, they have a certain expectation for service, right? So if the service cannot meet their standard, they will give 3.5 or 4-star rating at the most. But because the food is so good, they will not give a very low rating as well. So that's a sweet point. But that's without any that's just based on their own experience. But I do find that quite interesting. Yeah. Any other thoughts on this? So here, as you can see, I just want to give you an example of the possibilities that you can do with this code, with this kind of data. For example, I'm not sure like what kind of data set you are currently working on, but let's say you are interested in reviews or evaluations toward a certain type of food, let's say Chinese food or Asian cuisine, then you will be able to do this comparison, like especially for those like Asian fusion restaurants that serve both authentic Chinese food or like authentic Asian food and Western style food. Maybe within those kind of restaurants, we can do this kind of sentiment analysis towards specific kind of food. So I hope that this can it will not be a like a one-time use sort of code. I think you can easily adapt this for your own need, like especially like other dimensions of sentiment. So now we have about like how much time do I have? 10 minutes. So I do want to discuss with you like what are the pros and cons of sentence level analysis, like or do you have any other questions about this kind of like tiny part, yet tiny but I think important part of sentiment analysis? Any other general questions before I quickly talk about like a bonus, which is the ChatGPT API.
Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So I do have a question about the difference between sentiment analysis and discrete emotion analysis. Because a lot of my colleagues and students are more interested in trying to figure out the exact emotion out of the sentence instead of just positive or negative. They want to figure out whether people are happy or angry or content or something like more discrete. So I just want to know your thoughts on that. Like, do you think?
So if I answer correctly, you are asking about how to find more dimensions of sentiment.
Yeah, like discrete emotion.
Oh,
like positive. For positive, you have happy and satisfied. unified and other discrete functions?
Well, yes. My go-to will be checking some well-established dictionaries and some well-established language models. And may I ask, like, what's the language of the text?
Both Chinese and English.
Oh, good question. So, in a ongoing project, I'm working on a Chinese text that is quite challenging until I find ChatGPT API. So, yeah, honestly, you can after this workshop, you can check this blog article. Basically, you can quickly adapt the code provided by this author to have ChatGPT do all kinds of work. And I will tell you this: I did some rounds of experiment or like tries to have ChatGPT rate the sentiment of Chinese text, in combined with English text and English text, and they are quite surprisingly, I think they are quite accurate. So to your point, to your question, if you want to know more dimensions of emotion, I will first of all check the pre-existing well-established dictionaries and language models. And if you are not satisfied, I will definitely check ChatGPT API. But I'm hesitant to talk about this in the workshop because first of all, at this moment, I think you do need lots of validation and robustness check before you can use the result directly from ChatGPT for your work. But it is I think a new opportunity because, for example, I wanted to detect stances from users, interacting with, another group in Chinese text. Previously, I thought it was not possible, at least for me, probably to learn and to be able to do this, it's gonna take me probably a few months. But with this tool, it's like 2 minutes. It's very powerful, and as long as you know how to ask the ChatGPT, I think you will be able to get reasonable results. So again, it's what I'm talking about is the API, not about like typing and like chatting with ChatGPT. For example, in the API, you can design your prompt to have ChatGPT give you exactly the let's say from 1 to 7 scale, exactly the number of the sentiment, or you can have it tell you whether this sentence is for or against or neutral toward a stance. So I think it opens up a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, sorry, I just have another quick question. So how do you normally deal with sarcasm in analysis?
Sorry, I cannot hear you clearly, the last part.
How do you
know?
How do you deal with sarcasm in sentiment analysis? Like people say
sarcasm, right? Yeah. Good point. Especially when I'm working on Chinese text, it is very difficult, and I do not have a good answer to this, other than I would definitely go with this, yeah. Because sarcasm, I think it has been a long-standing question, right? And my personal suggestion would be, if you are really wanna detect sarcasm on a large data set, I would randomly sample, let's say 200 documents or reviews or sentences from the large data set, and have a group of coders to, well, you can have M-turkers to detect sarcasm, and also have the same a sample of like 200 sentences done by ChatGPT. And if the agreement tend to be high, then you can use the API. That's my suggestion. And based on my personal experience, I think probably OpenAI's API is quite accurate, especially when we are talking about the non-English text.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay. Since you have already published many papers in this field, so I'm gonna ask you a question about publication by using this communication method. What kind of general overarching research questions should we ask by using this sentimental analysis for publication? Because nowadays it's not very enough to just describe the general pattern. So you don't need to give a specific research question, but maybe future direction of what kind of this methods can do, so to be get published, to be recognized.
Yeah.
As contribution.
Yeah. Good question. So for this method, I think it allows us to ask more specific research questions, right? As some of you previously mentioned, like you don't like the fact that sentiment analysis normally only tell you whether it is positive, neutral, or negative, or how positive or how negative. And with this, the second part of tutorial, I think we will be able to ask questions about whether like people are positive toward a specific dimension. And overall, I think for sentiment analysis, normally I would start my research question based on behaviors, like the likelihood of interacting with each other, or the possibility of pairing with certain groups or encountering certain events. But it oftentimes will lead to the question of how they interact with each other, and that's where sentiment analysis come into play. And after sentiment analysis, I will usually do like topic modeling or word to vec, or like other methods to present like what the texts are talking about, what people are talking about, or what consumers are talking about when they post negative or positive reviews. So overall, I think for the second part of the tutorial, hopefully it gives you some ideas of how to ask more specific research questions about sentiment analysis, especially related to different dimensions. And I think for sentiment analysis overall, it asks the question of how, and I think it serves a important, I would say, direction for asking the question of like why or what they are talking about. Let me check the question in the chat box here. Oh, do you have a process of inspecting which words in the dictionary primarily driving your sentiment scores? Actually, yes. So I would normally inspect this by comparing the frequent words of different sentences. So that's I would normally do, but that's just a way of checking like what are they talking about and why for certain reviews they tend to be extremely positive, extremely negative. Any other questions? So actually, that's all the materials I would like to present today. I would like to share today.
Okay, thank you so much.
Oh, let me. Yep. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your participation. And since Dr. Chao is joining our department at NUS the upcoming semester, so we are very looking forward to see you at NUS. So thank you again for your participation, and we will see you at NUS. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks so much.